time where our country is more diverse than ever and more divided than ever.
What is the gospel? This isn't just good news for us, it's good news for the world.
And so when we care for the world, we care for issues that impact the world.
When we study the Gospels, we learn about Jesus' favorite themes. And clearly his favorite theme was God.
The only way you really discover the good stuff of the kingdom is when we let God break apart our mediocre assumptions. For too long, we've preached a cross that is too small.
We want the Word of God to be proclaimed in a way that people can listen and be changed for His glory and the building of His kingdom.
We're in a time where our country is more diverse than ever and more divided than ever.
What is the gospel? This isn't just good news for us, it's good news for the world.
And so when we care for the world, we care for issues that impact the world.
When we study the Gospels, we learn about Jesus' favorite themes. And clearly his favorite theme was God.
The only way you really discover the good stuff of the kingdom is when we let God break apart our mediocre assumptions. For too long, we've preached a cross that is too small.
We want the Word of God to be proclaimed in a way that people can listen and be changed for His glory and the building of His kingdom.
The wisdom of the Enneagram is extraordinarily accurate in describing human behavior and human nature. And then, all at the same time, it gives you the wisdom that you need to be less of the worst of you and more of the best of you. Without understanding why we do what we do, any kind of lasting change in behavior is unlikely. So you're going to come to see that in lots of ways, the Enneagram explains to you your life. It'll explain the past, it'll explain how you feel today, and it will explain to you why you choose certain jobs and certain friends. The problem is, when you're entrenched in your number, you may be doing the right things, but for the wrong reasons. And that's trouble. Get over that you are the way you are and you can't be any different, because you can be better at being who you are. Your personality can be in charge of you, or you can be in charge of your personality. Because the purpose of my work and our work here is to try to promote a journey of transformation. If you can come away from this time and understand yourself better, if you can understand the people that you work with and that you walk beside in life and that you live with better, if it helps you be more mindful of your behavior and more forgiving of the behavior of other people, then we will have done a mighty thing together. I can promise with a fair degree of certainty that this journey will be one you'll never forget.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Seminary Now live event. Seminary Now is a streaming video platform delivering Bible, theology, and ministry courses from diverse groups of leading professors and authors. I'm Kayla Vu, the Marketing and Communications Manager at Seminary Now, and our topic today is going to be the Enneagram Journey. It's a new course available at seminarynow.com. And so before we get started, I want to introduce you to our guest today, Suzanne Stabile. She's affectionately known as the Enneagram Godmother, and she is the author of many books from InterVarsity Press, including The Road Back to You, The Path Between Us, and The Journey Toward Wholeness. And she's been teaching in the Enneagram for about 25 years now. She and her husband are co-founders of Life in the Trinity Ministry, and that's based in Dallas, Texas. So after this webinar, I'm going to encourage you guys to watch her course, The Enneagram Journey, on our website, seminarynow.com. So Suzanne, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. It's cold but clear in Dallas, and this is my last event before the holidays, so I'm doing really well.
Do you have any traditions that that you just really love and that you want to share with us?
Sure. My husband's a pastor, and we have 4 children, and they're all significantly involved in their churches.
Mm.
And our tradition is that they always come to where we are for Christmas Eve candlelight service,
Oh, wow.
which is really lovely. Joe is often like this year on Christmas morning, he's preaching. So we won't be with our family till the afternoon since Christmas is on a Sunday.
Mhm.
So it's a big thing for us to all get together on Christmas Eve. There are 19 of us, and anytime we're all in the same place, it's a gift.
Yeah, I understand that. My husband's a pastor too, and so we love the holidays, but it's definitely busy in ministry.
Yeah,
But it's a
yeah.
joy. So before we get started, I just want to share with our audience a few opportunities that's going to be that's kind of like our little Christmas giveaway. So we have a subscription giveaway. We're giving a 1-year subscription from Seminary Now. So for a chance to win, all you have to do is share this live stream on Facebook, and then from that, we'll draw a winner. So you can share up to 24 hours after the event to be counted in the drawing. And then secondly, you can sign up to view the Enneagram Journey course and many more on our website, seminarynow.com, if you just sign up for a 7-day free trial. And so with that said, I'm going to share the Enneagram trailer here so you guys can watch this 2-minute trailer before we get started.
The wisdom of the Enneagram is extraordinarily accurate in describing human behavior and human nature. And then, all at the same time, it gives you the wisdom that you need to be less of the worst of you and more of the best of you. Without understanding why we do what we do, any kind of lasting change in behavior is unlikely. So you're going to come to see that in lots of ways, the Enneagram explains to you your life. It'll explain the past, it'll explain how you feel today, and it will explain to you why you choose certain jobs and certain friends. The problem is, when you're entrenched in your number, you may be doing the right things, but for the wrong reasons. And that's trouble. Get over that you are the way you are and you can't be any different, because you can be better at being who you are. Your personality can be in charge of you, or you can be in charge of your personality. Because the purpose of my work and our work here is to try to promote a journey of transformation. If you can come away from this time and understand yourself better, if you can understand the people that you work with and that you walk beside in life and that you live with better, if it helps you be more mindful of your behavior and more forgiving of the behavior of other people, then we will have done a mighty thing together. I can promise with a fair degree of certainty that this journey will be one you'll never forget.
Hey, Suzanne. I'd really love to hear about how you got introduced to the Enneagram and how it really captured your heart and where that all began.
Well, my husband is a former Roman Catholic priest. We've been married for 35 years, but 38 years ago, we started Life in the Trinity ministry in the Catholic Church.
Mhm.
And after Joe left the priesthood, and after a time, we decided to date, and then we married. And in all of that time, we experienced a lot of transition in our lives. I was a
Mhm.
single mom with 3 children, and then one day, Joe, because he was a Vincentian priest, and Father Richard Rohr is a Franciscan priest, he just called Father Rohr on the phone and said, "My wife and I have had some significant spiritual experiences, and we are looking for a wisdom person. Can we come see you?" And he said, "Sure, come on."
Wow.
And so for the last maybe 28 years, we've been going to say, "What do you think about this?" And we've become great friends. Early in that process, one day when we were there for a day of direction, he handed me a manuscript for one of his Enneagram books and said, "Read this. I think you'll really like it." And
Mm.
I devoured it. And the next time we were together, I told him how much I loved it and that I wanted more. And he said, "I thought it would be intuitive for you, and I would suggest that you study it for 5 years without talking about it."
Hmm.
And that's a big challenge for me as a person with anything that I like, and particularly it was with the Enneagram.
I understand.
But he is a wisdom person for us, and so I studied for 5 years.
So, did you know Richard Rohr before that call, or was it just you guys
We
got linked up through the call?
we knew his work,
Okay.
but we didn't know him.
Oh, wow.
So Joe called and said, "Can we come?" And he said yes, and we've been journeying to Albuquerque since to be
And
with him.
yeah, that's great. So how do you think the Enneagram differs in that sense? Like when you read the Enneagram for the first time, how did you find it different from other personality tests?
Well, it wasn't introduced to me as a personality test
Mhm.
or actually as personality. It was
Mm,
introduced to me as spiritual wisdom.
mm,
So I received it that way.
yeah.
And I think the thing that assured me that I should stay with it is that the Enneagram describes me perfectly, the best part of me and the worst part of me, and all the parts in between. And I am convinced now, I don't know if I knew this then, that you can't change what you can't name.
Mm,
And
mm,
so, like Paul, I think most of us go through life saying, "I just keep doing the very thing I don't want to do.
mm,
And
mm,
I don't know why I can't quit doing this thing." And the reason is because of your personality type. I think the distinction between the Enneagram and other personality tests, first of all, is that it's spiritual wisdom. But secondly, um, other tests, all of them, I don't have anything against them. I think everything you can do to understand yourself better is helpful.
mm,
But all of the ones that I've experienced, and I think it's most of them, from Myers Briggs to all the new things they're trying, identify you. But they don't teach you anything about anybody else.
mm,
And they don't tell you what you can do to be a better you.
mm,
And the Enneagram does. It shows you that you have the gifts for that already. You just have to uh, hear that and be able to connect to it. And I, when I teach a basic workshop, which is 8 hours for me, a know your number workshop,
wow.
very few people leave not knowing what their Enneagram number is. And it didn't have to be a number. It could have been flowers or trees or colors. It happens to be a number. And it happens to be associated with an
Mm,
Enneagram, which really just means 9 points. It's just a circle with 9 points in it. It's helpful, because as it turns out, all of those lines mean something.
Yeah, for sure. I remember first hearing about the Enneagram in my undergrad years, and I was leading small group in my college dorm, and all of my friends, they were trying to guess my number. And so I was like, "Is that a real thing? Does that really happen where someone just sees you and they just guess what you are?" And so apparently I'm a 7. That's what they said, but
Well, I think you need to listen to me for 8 hours and decide for yourself.
oh,
But it's real important for me to say that I don't trust any of the tests.
Hmm.
The Enneagram is potentially 3,000 or more years old, and it was an oral tradition and literally until 1974. The first thing was published in 1974
Hmm.
about the modern Enneagram. So we're trying to hasten a learning experience that ought not be hastened, because nobody can tell you what your number is, number one. And number two, your Enneagram number is not determined by your behavior. It's determined by your motivation for your behavior.
I've never heard that.
So observing people and thinking you know their number, you might get it right, but you most likely will not.
So, what do you think the best way to find out what your Enneagram number is? Is it through reading? Is it through meditating? Like, in your perspective?
Well, it sounds self-serving, but I really believe that the best primer that's written is The Road Back to You, which I wrote with Ian Cron.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's the best because it's my work that came from years of teaching and changing little things about how I taught, 40 minutes on each number based on what people of that number taught me about themselves. So after teaching for 25 years, I know what I knew when I started that I learned from other people. But more importantly, I know what I learned from the people who are in the room with me, who are those numbers. So for years, I had a 3-year apprentice program. Now I have a 1-year cohort program. And at our center here in Dallas, I only work with 40 people at a time. So as much as I teach, they teach me.
Yeah. And I know that there's a lot of different common perceptions about the Enneagram. Some are good, some are bad, some are neutral even. And so I'd love to hear some things that you've heard about the Enneagram that you just like to debunk, or some that you want to address. Because I know for me, when I was first introduced to the Enneagram, I didn't really understand it, and so I did some research. I even wrote an undergrad paper on it, because I definitely saw it as a useful tool, but also um, one that can take away from the local church if we're not careful. And so, what are some good and bad perceptions that you've often heard?
Okay. It's going to take me a long time to answer that. So I want to say one more thing about the previous question, and then I'll start on that
Sure.
one. And regarding the previous question, I think The Road Back to You is the best primer. However, all of my recorded teaching, the 40 minutes on each number, is available on our website. And I think it is much better to hear it taught orally. I teach with storytelling, which gives people space of nuanced difference within numbers to relate to what I'm sharing. And we just hear different than we read.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would say is that when I start a Know Your Number workshop, which I actually just did yesterday in a hospital system here in Dallas, I say, you'll probably know your number when you leave today at 5. I'm positive that you'll be more compassionate when you leave.
Mm-hmm.
So from that platform, I'll answer your other question. People don't want to be put in a box. And my answer to that is the Enneagram doesn't put you in a box. It shows you the box that you're already in. The Enneagram is sometimes perceived to be a negative, esoteric kind of secular thing that's around for people to identify with or not. And I would just say that most of the negative things that have been written about the Enneagram have been written in relationship to Father Richard Rohr. And I think that's because there are people who wanted a place to stand to oppose him because of his gospel teaching, actually.
Interesting.
And this was a way in to do that. More conservative folks, when I'm on podcasts or radio programs or when I'm doing a webinar like this one of the questions is, what's dangerous about the Enneagram? And I didn't know the answer to that for a long time, but I know it now. And I always had it. I just hadn't verbalized it. And the only thing I can think of that's dangerous about the Enneagram is if you take it to be more than it is.
Yeah.
The Enneagram is just one thing. It's one piece of spiritual wisdom. But discernment is one thing, and study is one thing,
Yeah.
and worship is one thing, and celebration is one thing, and fasting is one thing, and giving is one thing. I do a 20-minute sit every day. My husband and I have a long-standing spiritual practice. I've had a spiritual director for years. He's 75, and he's had a spiritual director since he was 14 when he went to high school seminary.
Wow.
So we're plugging the Enneagram into the spiritual lives that we already had. We're not saying, I'm not saying ever, this is the answer to everything.
Right.
Because it isn't. But it is part of a chance we have to understand ourselves. So essentially, I teach people who they're not. You're not your personality. But you had to have your personality in order to grow up because of all the things that happen. And my goal in teaching people the Enneagram is that they can name the reality that the best part of you is also the worst part of you. So I'm a 2 on the Enneagram. That actually means that at my best, I can do Christ-like things. I can make other people more important than I am in the moment. I'm generous as a 2. Giving comes naturally to me. I can do all of that with ease as a 2. But I can do all those same things and be manipulative with those gifts and controlling and selfish. It's possible to do both. And if you don't know that and you can't name that, then how do you change that?
Yeah.
I would also have to say that I don't think change and transformation are the same thing. I think change is when we take on something new, and the Enneagram and learning it would be about taking on something new. But change occurs when transformation occurs, when something old falls away, usually beyond your control. And being able to identify personality that you don't need anymore and allowing that to fall away, not trying to make it go away, gets all of us closer to the essence of who we were created to be. And in the reality of that piece of wisdom that I've just shared, it seems clear to me why, as Christians, we would want to be able to let go of the things that we've added to make our way in the world, but that are not a full representation of who we're created to be by God.
Yeah.
And then finally, in answering that question, I would say that my husband teaches spiritual direction at Perkins School of Theology, and he says that spiritual directors are in the role of inviting people to bring their real selves before the real God. And he's a witness to that.
Wow.
And my real self is not my 2-ness. My real self is underneath my 2-ness. And it's the best of my 2-ness.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you name those things if you don't know something like the wisdom of the Enneagram.
Yeah. So you're saying the aid to this is to not make it the only thing.
No,
Right.
absolutely not.
Right.
And it's not a 10-question test. It doesn't have anything to do with what kind of salad you like or how you like to celebrate the Christmas holidays. It's not any of what I now call trendy Enneagram.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. I know we talked a little bit about that behind before we started this, but if you want to speak into trendy Enneagram, I'd love to hear more about your perspective on that.
So I'm teaching now in my 29th year, and the reality is that for the first 24 years, nobody had any idea what the Enneagram was.
Mhm.
So I was traveling all over the country teaching the Enneagram in universities and hospitals and churches. And people would say on the airplane, "Well, are you going to work? Or are you going home?" And I would say, "Well, I'm going to work." "Well, what do you do?" "Well, I'll try to tell you, but there is no elevator speech for the Enneagram. Really, there's not a good one." And people had never heard of it.
Yeah.
And now, honestly, I would say 9 flights out of 10, somebody at the airport or on the plane knows who I am, and they
Mm.
say, "You're the Enneagram lady," or, "Are you the Enneagram godmother?" or, "Are you Suzanne Stabile?"
Do they really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have to behave all the time now,
Oh no.
all the time. So, this won't last because it's
Mhm.
spiritual wisdom. But right now, it's helpful to get people interested in a deeper journey, which is what I do.
Mm.
But people who are taking a little test and think they know their number and their wing and their subtype, they don't. That's not true. A test can't give you that. The Enneagram is about 9 ways of seeing. And you can never change how you see. You can only change what you do with how you see. And anybody who comes to this believing that we're all pretty much the same, we're not pretty much the same.
Mm.
We don't have the same gifts.
Yeah.
But when we come together with all of the gifts that we have, then we are Christian community. And when we are Christian community, each of us offering the gifts that we have, then we are the face of God in the world.
Mm.
And I don't quite see how we're going to do that representing just one way of seeing and one way
Yeah.
of being. Joe and I have so much more to give as a couple and
Mhm.
as 2 different Enneagram numbers than we do as individuals.
Yeah, when it comes to the Enneagram, I think it reminds me of a quote that my friend said to me over Thanksgiving break. I went back to Kansas, to my hometown, and my friend, she said to me, the difference between medicine and something poisonous is the dosage. And so it just reminds me of what you said about the Enneagram, because I do hear one of the viewers are asking that a common criticism I hear about the Enneagram is its origins and that it's associated with the occult. How do we address that? How would you address that?
Well, the best example or answer I have for that is Evagrius Ponticus, who was Christian through and through
Mhm.
centuries ago, is the first for sure known thing we have about the Enneagram. So it is not the occult. It has been labeled that by people who don't know the Enneagram. And frankly, it's been labeled frequently that way by people who don't know the difference in an Enneagram and a pentagram.
Mm.
And I don't try to defend the Enneagram anymore. It's like you can argue anything you want to with scripture, and you can argue anything you want to about the Enneagram. So I just say this, you know what? If it works for you and it makes you a better human being and you have more compassion, great. And if you don't like the Enneagram and you don't want to participate in learning it, that's okay too.
Mm.
It took me a long time to embrace a contemplative practice because of my personality. I'm not just an extrovert, I'm an extroverted extrovert. And I used to just say, I don't want to do a 20-minute sit every day.
Mm.
But what I've learned is that I can't be who I'm called to be without that time of me not being who I want to be.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, yep.
And on days when I don't do a sit, I'm not as kind, I'm not as gentle, I'm not as generous, I'm not as faithful. I'm not. That's
Me
just
and
fact.
coffee. Yeah.
Yeah. So people who have pushed back against the Enneagram, that's okay. That's okay.
Mhm.
I could say 10,000 words. And if you don't want to have as part of your bag of tools that make life better and make you better at life, if you don't want the Enneagram to be part of that, that's okay.
Yeah. And so for those who do want to make this part of their tool belt,
Yeah.
especially Christian leaders,
Yeah.
how do you think they should go about that? How should Christian leaders engage with those under their care using the Enneagram?
Well, the answer is carefully.
Yeah.
Because, so first of all, let me say that when I'm teaching in churches, I say with my strongest, sternest personality, there's nothing that you can't say about the Enneagram and about what you've learned about yourself with the Enneagram that requires that you use the word Enneagram or that you give a number.
That's good.
So don't let the Enneagram be insider, outsider language in any community that you belong to.
Mm-hmm.
My husband is on staff at First United Methodist Church in Dallas. He's retired, but he's working there part-time because he's a pastor through and through.
Yeah. Yes.
But I've been teaching that church for 10 years. Literally, it's a big church, a big downtown United Methodist Church. There is zero pushback for the Enneagram because their staff has been working with it for so long that they are better at what they do. And so, in terms of pastoring, you can't guess somebody's number, and you shouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can be aware, though, if you do levels of Enneagram work. You know, the Enneagram is not know your number. The Enneagram is know your number, and then it's triads, and then it's managing your dominant center out of thinking, feeling, or doing. And then it's bringing up your repressed center out of thinking, feeling, or doing. And then it's knowing whether or not you're social or one-to-one or self-preserving. And then it's knowing how you're going to use this spiritual wisdom in your relationship with God and who you are and who God created you to be. It's all of that. It's certainly not a 10-question test. And it's not an 8-hour workshop with me. It's all of the additional work that you do with the Enneagram that helps you be more versed in it and therefore more able to receive other people as they are and where they are.
Yeah.
And if, as churches, we keep holding up who you should be instead of we love you for who you are and we want to walk with you on your journey, we're going to continue to lose your generation.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a counselor, right? You know all the terms.
Yep.
You know all the terms, but you don't use it when you're talking to a friend in a coffee
That's
shop.
exactly right.
Right.
That's exactly right.
Right.
And the awareness that there are people who want to tell you, like me, who want to tell you their whole story and they want to talk about their family, and people who are very private and they've come to you for help, but they don't want to give you more information than they already have. And people, ones on the Enneagram who are struggling to get everything correct because they don't believe that they're good. And fours on the Enneagram who are the most complex type of all and who feel like nobody understands them. And that's because nobody does. When you realize that you have the potential of that and more sitting in the chair in front of you who's asking for your help, then you listen more than you talk.
Yeah.
And you learn that you have different things to offer because God gives them to you through the gifts of the Spirit. And you have to be a vessel, and you can be a better vessel if you can recognize the potential difference that's in front of you.
Yeah. I have a question here from our viewer. It says, this is toward you. It says, your seminary now course is amazing. I'm 90% sure that I am a 5. raised in a verbally abusive home, I have the voice of a critic even after forgiving those who hurt me. So, how does abuse affect the results?
Okay, that's a great question.
Mhm.
I'm sorry about the abuse that you experienced, and I hope you can find ways to use it in connecting with other people who have experienced abuse, because it's a different thing than connecting with someone who hasn't.
Yeah.
So the reality is that your number is well honed by the time you're 4 or 5. My language is that you're born genetically predisposed to be a certain number. I can't prove that. So that you either have to trust it or you don't. But there has to be some reason why we're all different. And yet I have people that I teach this way all over the world.
Mhm.
And they all fall in one of these 9 places. So something's happening that's correct, right? So people believe that they were one number before abuse and that they're another number after abuse. And
Really?
that's not true.
Mm.
The reality is that at all times, you're either healthy or average or unhealthy in your number. You may be in excess in your number and you may be pathological, but your number never changes. And so the thing that helps you in all of that is, what is your motivation?
Mm.
And so I'm not sure exactly how to answer the question about the critic, except to say that we all have self-talk. We all have it. And we all have it from vulnerability and ways that we've picked up messages about ourselves. And if you, it sounds like you've received the Enneagram well, and it sounds like you are sure that you're a 5. And I would really encourage you to, and again, this sounds self-serving, which I don't want to do, but there's not somebody else's book I can recommend. I'm sorry. But my most recent book, The Journey Toward Wholeness, has a lot of good work that you could do that will help you as a 5 do the work you need to do to learn to separate yourself from all of that negative talk that's coming from childhood.
Mm.
And it's 5s are thinking dominant, and feeling supports thinking, and doing is repressed. And so I know you have a lot of feelings about how you think and about how you think about yourself. And this is something that you can do about that. And then you will be balanced in thinking, feeling, and doing, which is a good thing. And you'll have a way forward that I think will surprise you.
Well, Suzanne, another viewer question here is about how we perceive God. So, depending on our number, does that change how we perceive God?
Well, depending on our number, it changes how we see and then understand everything. So
Mhm.
I'm going to use 2 numbers as an example. So I'm going to talk about 1s first, because 1s have an internal critic from childhood that criticizes them all the time. If they grow up in a church that, or in a family or in a community that teaches that God is a punishing God, then that fits for them, because they don't think they're good enough and they don't think they can be good enough.
Mm.
And so they take on that Old Testament view of God. And then it's someone's responsibility to say, wait, what if God is all loving and all benevolent and all forgiving? Then how do you see yourself in relationship to God?
Mm.
4s. For 4s, the complexity of the way they see the world, they are feeling dominant, and feelings are intense for them, and they need texture and depth. And a good understanding of the Gospels gives them all of that. And while they find a very difficult time finding a place in the society or in their community where they really feel seen and heard and understood, they can get pretty easily to a place with good theology and with some good pastoral care to know that in all of their complexity, they are seen and understood and known by God. And so I believe that the Gospels make room for every Enneagram number. If you read Luke and there are things that make you a little bit uncomfortable, then you can be pretty sure that's your Enneagram number. So I'll give you an example. Mary and Martha, and Jesus comes to visit because he's friends with Lazarus. Those of you who are theologians, forgive this commentary on Scripture. I'm not a theologian.
Everyone's a theologian.
But Jesus comes to visit because he and Lazarus are friends. And Mary is in the front room chatting with Jesus. And Martha's in the kitchen. And she's tired and hot and jealous because she wants to be talking to Jesus, but she's got to cook and get everything ready for the dinner because that's her role.
Mm-hmm.
And then she keeps working hard and nobody's helping her. So she goes in and she says to Jesus, essentially, I'm in here doing all this and to serve you, and you're just in here talking with Mary. And Jesus says, but Mary has chosen the better part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So my husband's a lectionary preacher. Every 3 years when that scripture comes along, he gives me a warning on Sunday mornings that today's the day. So it's your Martha day. Be ready. So over the years, what I've learned to do is try to look at that from a different perspective and a different perspective. And here's what I've learned. The fact that I think I'm serving God doesn't always mean that I'm serving God.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm serving myself by doing the things that I think I'm good at that are going to make somebody else love me.
Yeah.
I think there are stories right there in the Gospels for everybody.
Yeah. And so with that said, I know you mentioned it a little bit, but where do you see the different numbers reflecting the heart of God?
It's very important to ones to do things correctly. It's very important to twos to connect with people on a personal level.
Yeah.
It's very important to threes to have goals and to know where you're headed and to reach them. Mm-hmm. It's very important to fours that things be talked about and shared about at a deeper level. It's very important to fives that we know enough and that we have enough knowledge on board before we say too much. Mm-hmm. Sixes are the number on the Enneagram. They're the most concerned about the common good. So they're looking out for everybody. Sevens bring delight to our lives because happiness has got to be part of the journey. Eights are strong leaders who are very sure of themselves. And nines are the people on the Enneagram who are the peacemakers who can see at least two sides to everything.
Yeah.
All of that combined is the kind of goodness that I think God is.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have those other 8 parts.
Yeah.
What I bring to the table is a gift for relationships.
Mm-hmm.
What my husband brings to the table as a 9 is a gift for mediation. And all of those, when held and practiced within the context of the love of God, are necessary in a Christian community for us to move forward as a whole.
Yeah.
And none of us have it all.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I could go through 10 times and tell you a different thing that each number has that brings to us a reflection of who God is or who we think God is. And it becomes clearer and clearer that we are different and we have unique gifts, and that the best way for us to live is in community.
Mhm. Yeah, Carolyn has a specific question from the audience. She says that she's an 8, and so she wants to know if 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 a number 8 or any other number shows up differently in men versus women. Like, is there a difference in how these types are perceived, how they
Yes.
express themselves according to gender or sex?
Yeah. For 8s in particular, so it's interesting to me that she's asking the question. I was the first women's basketball coach at SMU after Title IX, so I've done my bit for fighting the good fight for justice for women.
Yes. Woo! I played
Right?
basketball too. So.
Oh, well, there you have it. I've done my thing, and that was a long time ago.
Mhm.
I'm 72, and the world has come a little bit in terms of civil rights and a little bit in terms of gender difference, but we have a long way to go in my estimation. And for some reason, male 8s are really honored. We love them. They think fast and quick. They're smart. They're really good leaders. We want to line up behind them and we want to follow them. That they can know and solve problems before they happen. Like, they're great.
Mhm.
You put all of those same gifts in a female,
Mm.
and the cultural language, which is the only language I can use with integrity, is that female 8s are seen and referred to as bitches. People say she's just a bitch. So my oldest daughter's an 8, and I have more things to say about that. The first thing is that she was never called a bitch until 5th grade. My youngest daughter works as a counselor, therapist for a whole diocese of little kids.
Mm.
And now those little girls are called a bitch in the 2nd grade. And so what they do is they try to get rid of 8ness, of their way of seeing the world, to get rid of that label, and it never works. So we have a cultural problem in understanding the difference in male and female 8s. And female 8s are the most misunderstood number on the Enneagram. But male 8s are the second most misunderstood number on the Enneagram.
Wow.
Now, 4s have lots of feelings, and they like feelings, and they like to deal with feelings. And so female 4s are more acceptable culturally than male 4s are. Female 2s are more accepted culturally than male 2s. Male 2s are seen to be too helpful and too soft. And male 4s are seen to be too dramatic and too much. 4s say all the time, I always feel like I'm either too much or not enough.
Mm.
Other than that, I don't think there's a lot of difference in the way the Enneagram defines and the way the culture experiences the different 9 numbers.
So, as for church leaders who are primarily our viewers, what do you think, knowing the male female perception and how we express ourselves, what do you think the way forward is for pastors and leaders who are reading Enneagram books, who might know Enneagrams, but see, maybe an 8 in a woman and an 8 in a man? Like, how do we still love them well, knowing these different parts of their personalities?
Well, if you know the different parts of their personalities, then you know the different parts of your own.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, I started with saying the best part of you is also the worst part of you.
Yeah.
And so if you have compassion for yourself, and if you can see that each number, each type, each way of seeing, people are trying in churches and in church leadership to be the best people they know how to be, and to make room for everybody to be at the table with them, then the overall reality is, accept that there are 9 ways of seeing, accept that there are ways of expressing that way of seeing or that personality type, and accept that everybody's bringing a gift to table that you need.
That's good. Yeah.
You need each perspective, not just your own. Your own will come up short every time. It's a big mistake in leadership anywhere to surround yourself with people who think just like you do and who see just like you do.
Yeah.
And the reality is, we're called to have compassion for everybody, everybody. And so I think that's the overarching reality. And I am sad to say that aggressive women, who are generally 3s, 7s, and 8s, and sometimes 1s, have a really hard time in ministry, because women in church, period, are expected, regardless of denomination and regardless of age, women in church are expected to be softer than men.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Which is sad, right? But
It's the reality.
yeah, so Suzanne, from your perspective, you worked with so many women and men over the years. And so what do you feel like is the biggest lesson that you've learned over the years working with everyone who's trying to discover more of themselves, the best and the worst parts? What are some big lessons that might be helpful for us to know?
I guess the first one would be, with very few exceptions, I really believe everybody's doing the best they can.
Yeah.
I think the 5 who asked a question earlier, my guess is her parents were doing the best they could. I think people are trying, and they just don't have very many tools. They don't have things like the Enneagram to understand why they do what they do. And if, as I said earlier, if you can't name it, you can't change it. You just keep saying, yeah, that's who I am. That's the way I am. That's the way I've always been. I also think that people want they want to get to be who they are and use the gifts they have. So I teach adult Sunday school, and I really like it.
Yeah.
Not many people want to teach adults, period, and they don't want to teach adult Sunday school. I don't want to work with Vacation Bible School.
Oh, me either.
I've raised 4 children. I have 9 grandchildren. I've done that. I don't want to do anything with Vacation Bible School.
Yeah.
But there are people who do. And we just don't seem to want to. I think that's not true. I think knowing the Enneagram changes how you see, so that you recognize what is yours to do and what is not yours to do. And everybody I've met wants to do what's theirs to do. But if you ask Joe and me together, what's the number one question you get, no matter where you are, no matter what you're teaching? The number one question we get is about discernment.
Yeah.
How do I figure out what's mine to do? And I think that's because that's what people want to know. The overarching question of my life, I ask it every day. Start the day with it, probably ask it 15 times. What is mine to do? What is mine to do? What is mine to do here? Well, if you don't know what your gifts are, how are you supposed to answer the question of what is mine to do?
Yeah.
If you don't know what you have to offer, how are you supposed to play your part in the current gospel stories?
Yeah. For sure.
And so we try to be like somebody else, and it never works. It just never works. People are really good. There are people who are mentally ill. There are people who haven't had a chance in life. But at our best, at our souls, everybody is really good. They just need the tools to live out that goodness. And I'm a big believer that in churches, we got to make room for everybody and
Mm.
offer them a place to discover who they are.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I'd I remember writing my paper, like I shared with you about the Enneagram, and one thing that I wrote about was that, we don't affirm each other enough in the
No,
church, right?
no.
Like we need to, though. We need to we turn to the Enneagram tool because we see a need to be affirmed in
Right.
ourselves. And that's why we need friends and church leaders and pastors who will come alongside us and identify our gifts, identify the things that we're not that great at, and keep us accountable as well. And so I love how you're just sharing about the value of knowing yourself in that way. We are getting really close to time here, but I do have one final question for you, Suzanne. I would love to hear about one story of how the Enneagram has been used well in a church context. It could be in your own church, in another that you've heard, or even someone's life.
Well, I'm going to give you an example that's brief, and then I'm going to tell you a story.
Yeah.
The brief example is several churches that I've worked in for years, probably 10 or 15. Their church leadership boards have one of every number.
Mm.
So that way they know everybody at the church is being represented in their personality and their way of seeing the world when they make decisions for the body as a whole. Now, here's a church story for you. I was teaching in a church, and a woman believed that the man that she was dating was really close to understanding who he was in relationship to God after having not been willing to identify as a Christian for a long time. He happened to be a man who, during Vietnam, his name was Harry, and during the Vietnam War, he was one of the pilots who flew planes that carried bombs on them all day.
Wow.
All day, every day, not knowing if he would be ordered to drop one or not. That was his job. He was an 8 on the Enneagram. He discovered in an all-day Saturday workshop that he agreed to come to because he wanted this woman to leave him alone about the Enneagram. When I teach it, I start with 8s. So I said to him, it's clear you don't want to be here, and that's okay. How about you stay till noon, and if you want to leave, I'll refund your money, and I'll suggest to her that she needs to let you find your own way. He said, deal. We shook on it. By noon, he was all in.
Wow.
By the end of the day, he said, you're offering something tomorrow afternoon that I didn't sign up for. Can I come back? I said, of course you can. So he said, crying at that point, it took me all day because you taught my number first and my son's number last. But my son has a kidney condition that I think is a result of some poison that got on my shoes in an airplane hangar. And that ultimately affected him and other children of people who worked with me at that time. And he said, I gave him one of my kidneys, and he's not taking care of it. And he's behaving badly. And I've been really mad at him for a long, long time. But today, when you taught his number last, which was 7, I understood him for the first time, and I understood what he's doing. And so I'm going to go now and meet with him, and I'd like to come back tomorrow afternoon.
Wow.
He came back the next afternoon, said his husband, he and his son and his son's girlfriend stayed up for hours, went through all the numbers, talked about it all night, and that he and his son had reconciled that morning, and he was coming back to thank me.
Wow.
He then asked if he and his son could come to our church. I said, sure, you can. They came for 2 Sundays, and then his son died.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And Harry has for years said, I would be carrying all of that because he's so different from me. I just couldn't understand him at all.
Wow.
Now that's very heavy. So let's move to this. In the United Methodist Church, this is my last word, unless you want more. In the United Methodist Church, we are appointed, our pastors are appointed. I'm not a pastor. I'm not the we. Pastors are appointed by the bishop and his cabinet to churches that they believe they will serve well.
Mm-hmm.
And in the appointive system, sometimes they think they've done just a great job of who they've sent to a certain church, and it doesn't work. So that happened in our conference, and nobody really understood what happened because nobody really knew the story except the people involved. So I'm teaching the bishop and his cabinet, which is the district superintendents and the other leadership people who are in the conference office. And I talk about orientation to time in the Enneagram. 3 numbers are oriented to the future, 3 to the past, 3 to the present moment. And I say, it never works to appoint a pastor whose orientation to time is the future to a church whose orientation to time is the past. You have to have a pastor in between whose orientation to time is the present moment in order to be the bridge. And everybody at the table started talking about something, and I didn't know what they were talking about. And they all said, that's it. That's exactly what happened. That's what we did. We missed it because he is definitely oriented to the future, and the church is definitely oriented to the past. And it answered a question they had about an appointment they made to a big church in our conference that didn't work. So that's a administrative way that the Enneagram is helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
As you might imagine, I know that we're done, but I got more. Anytime you want it, I've got more.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. I've enjoyed having this conversation with you. I feel like I've learned so much, gleaned so much, and I just really appreciate your time spent with us here today, and I know the audience does as well. You've enlightened so much of us with just who you are and what you've presented today. A reminder for our participants, we're giving away a 1-year subscription to Seminary Now. So if you want a chance to win, simply share this link on your Facebook, and then we're going to draw a winner in the next 24 hours. Also, you have 24 hours to share this. So right after that, we'll announce who's won by direct message. And then secondly, sign up for a 7-day free trial to watch courses from Suzanne Stabile or others. So thank you guys so much for your time today. And thank you again, Suzanne. You've been wonderful. I've really enjoyed this time with you.
Thank you,
All right,
Kayla.
guys. Bye.